one of the things that stands out so much to me about compassion, and if I'm honest, sometimes, you might think, oh, something like this is just marketing. Like they say they're like, we're for the local church, but it's like, yeah. Like they just no, but what I've realized connecting with you and the team is that that's not just like a buzzword. It's not just a campaign. It's at the core of how you actually function as an organization. And what I've experienced as a pastor myself is like compassion for me, like helping me live out my mission as a pastor as I try to lead a congregation to global awareness and fruitfulness here in my own city and around the world. So I just would love to hear you talk about that element in the compassion story. Let me see if I can get this right. You guys are Christ-centered, child-focused, and church-based. And we can talk about all three of those, but can we start by talking about this church-based framework that you work from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's many ways you can think about our organization. Some would say, you're a child development organization, you're an NGO or an INGO. And we would say we are a missions organization that exists in response to the Great Commission to prioritize the whole needs of kids and their families. And in light of that, the way that we choose to go about this is to partner with local churches. And here's why, to unpack that further. We recognize, as I said, in light of our desire to be faithful to the Great Commission, that the church has the calling. Jesus said that in Matthew 16, verse 8, that on my rock I build this church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. And so we know that the church, we say, is God's plan A. And so we are all about joining God in mobilizing his church and his bride to live out their calling, to be his hands and his feet. So that is core to what we do. The other thing that we recognize in why the church is that the church also has the capacity as far as leadership and vision and members and volunteers. They have the proximity, so that the 8,000 church partners that we have around the world are in the context of extreme poverty, that have been there before Compassion started partnering with them, will be there long after they may need our partnership and support, and they have proximity to the assets and the needs in their own communities, right? And in light of that, the church then has, point number 4, the credibility of knowing their community, the credibility of engaging with their neighbors, the credibility of making a tangible impact in the lives of those around them and in the broader even community needs. So the theological reasons and the practical reasons are why we partner with churches and partner with local Indigenous leaders and pastors who know and love their communities and know the names and faces of those they serve.
When I think about the reality of extreme poverty around the world, it feels really, really big. And I don't know if this is a Canadian thing, but sometimes as a pastor, I think about the church in Canada, it feels really, really small. And I think it's a false narrative, that smallness. Like, I don't think it's false to think that the global need around extreme poverty is very, very big. But actually the church in Canada and then the network of churches around the world, we have a legitimate shot at making a dent on this. That, and if we, like, I think there's a shifting in our imagination that I think could be really powerful. We began to see, like, we could resource churches around the world to represent Christ, to meet the needs of their community. And there's 20,000 churches in Canada, and I know that the stats say we're on decline, and I know these things, but I think that one of the ways, and forgive me for talking so long, but one of the ways that I think we could recapture identity here and to actually win the imagination of people far from God here in Canada would be to recapture our opportunity to advocate for the least of these around the world. And so I don't think it's helpful to think of ourselves as small and there's no difference we can make. We might actually be able to take a real swing at some of these things.
Oh, I think that's exactly right, Jason. And one of the things that excites me when I think about the church in Canada is this reawakening that's happening around what it means to be the church. And there's a variety of reasons I think that that's happening. Part of it is, I think that you've got an emerging generation, and I'm always hesitant to paint these broad stroke sentiments for an entire generation.
Yeah.
In some ways you could say they have shown to be really, some of them disillusioned with the institution of the church,
Yeah.
because they would be saying, in some ways it's quite insular focused and not really engaged in meaningful ways in the needs around them in their own communities, never mind around the world. But they appear to be, and many of them would overtly say that they're enamored by the person of Jesus, and they
Mm.
can rally around who he is and how he boldly and radically lived out principles of compassion and justice and inclusion and unity in diversity, no less. And so, yeah, I think there's an incredible swelling that's already happening, an opportunity to reimagine what it looks like to be the church, and to recognize, back to our former conversation, that, the Great Commission is not a calling for this select few to go
Mm.
and make disciples, right? But when you look at what the original Greek word go meant, it's translated to as you're going, right? So in your going, in your daily life, in the place that God has called you, we are to be a part of living out his mission and to steward all that we are and all that we have to accomplish his mission in our own backyards and in around the world. And that imagination is happening more and more. And certainly that's part of my story and my church's journey as well.